Captain Jake Morrison sat in his small office aboard the UHS Defiance, reading the message for the third time. The words still seemed strange to him. The Galactic Military Alliance wanted humans to join their war games. Real war games with alien. Ships and crews from across the galaxy. Jake had been in the Earth Navy for 15 years. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt and defended mining colonies from raiders. But this was different. This was bigger than anything humans had ever done before. A message came from Admiral Vex Ron of the Xanthari Empire. The Xanthari were tall, gray-skinned beings who spoke in careful, measured tones. They had been part of the Alliance for over 300 years. To them, humans were newcomers who had just learned to travel between stars. Jake called his senior officers to the briefing room. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez arrived first. She was his tactical officer, a small woman with quick eyes and an even quicker mind. Behind her came Sergeant Pete Collins, the ship's engineer. Pete was a big man who could fix anything with spare parts and creativity. "What do you think about this?" Jake asked, sliding the message across the table. Amy read it quickly. "War games with aliens? Sounds like fun." Pete scratched his beard. "What kind of rules do they have?" Jake pulled up another file on his tablet. "Says here the games have been going on for centuries. They use energy weapons only. No projectiles. No explosives. Ships fight in space and ground forces fight on planets. Everything is monitored by judges." "Sounds boring," Amy said. "The winner gets respect from the other species," Jake continued, "and the loser learns from their mistakes." Pete laughed. "They want to teach us how to fight properly?" Jake nodded. "That seems to be the idea. The Xanthari think we're too new to space warfare. The Corvani think we're too crude. The Veltar think we're too simple." Amy's eyes lit up. "They underestimate us." "Completely," Jake agreed, "which might be useful." The next day, Jake received approval from Earth Command. The UHS Defiance would represent humanity in the Andromeda sector. War games. Jake spent the following week studying the other species and their fighting styles. The Xanthari were methodical. They moved their ships in perfect formations. Every attack was planned down to the second. They never took risks and never made mistakes. Their ships were beautiful, sleek things that looked more like art than weapons. The Corvani were warriors. They valued honor above victory and courage above life. They fought with passion, but also with discipline. Their ships were heavy and strong, built to ram into enemies and fight at close range. The Veltar were the smartest of the Alliance species. They could calculate the outcome of a battle before it started. They used complex strategies and advanced technology. Their ships were fast and carried the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. All three species had one thing in common. They treated warfare as a serious, almost sacred activity. There were rules to follow, traditions to respect, and proper ways to do everything. Humans, Jake realized, had a different approach to fighting. The journey to the war games took 2 weeks. During that time, Jake watched his crew prepare. Amy studied the tactical manuals, but also watched old Earth movies about war. Pete worked on the ship's systems, but also built strange devices in his spare time. "What is that?" Jake asked, finding Pete in the engineering bay with a collection of tubes and wires. "Modified waste disposal system," Pete said proudly. "Shoots garbage at high speed. That's not a weapon." "Says who?" Jake found Amy in the ship's computer center, typing rapidly. "What are you working on?" "Communication system modifications." Amy said, "Did you know we can override other ships' internal speakers?" "Is that legal?" "The rules don't say we can't." Jake began to understand that his crew was not preparing for the kind of war games the aliens expected. They arrived at the staging area 3 days before the games began. The human ship looked tiny next to the massive alien vessels. The Zenthari flagship was a kilometer long and perfectly smooth. The Corvani battlecruiser bristled with weapons and armor. The Veltar command ship seemed to be made of pure energy. Jake attended the commander's briefing. The alien officers were polite but distant. They spoke to him the way adults might speak to a child who wanted to play a grown-up game. "Captain Morrison," said Admiral Vexron, "we are pleased that humans wish to participate. These games will be educational for your species." "We're here to learn," Jake replied, which was true in a way. Commander Varrock of the Corvani stepped forward. "Do your people understand the honor of battle?" "We have our own ideas about honor," Jake said. Sub-Commander Zint of the Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter. "Human military theory is quite primitive. We have studied your conflicts. Much emotion, little strategy." "We do our best," Jake said mildly. "The first scenario would begin tomorrow. Human forces would defend a space station against attacking Zenthari ships. The aliens expected the humans to follow standard defensive procedures. They would position their ships in a protective formation and fight bravely until they were overwhelmed." Jake returned to his ship and called a meeting. "Tomorrow we show them how humans fight," he told his crew. "Remember, they think they know what we'll do. They're wrong." Amy grinned. "Can I use the music files?" "All of them," Jake said. Pete raised his hand. "Can I use the garbage cannon?" "Everything we've got," Jake confirmed. The crew cheered. For the first time in 3 centuries, the galaxy was about to learn that humans had their own ideas about warfare. And those ideas were about to change everything. The morning of the first war game arrived with the artificial dawn of the space station's lighting system. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance, watching the Zenthari fleet form up in the distance. 12 ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming silver against the black of space. "They're beautiful," Amy Rodriguez said from her tactical station. "Like dancers." "Deadly dancers," Pete Collins added from engineering. "Those ships could turn us into dust." Jake nodded. "In a fair fight, the humans would lose quickly." The Zenthari ships were faster, stronger, and carried more powerful weapons. But Jake had no intention of fighting fair. "Amy, how's our special communication system?" "Ready to broadcast on all frequencies," she replied with a smile. "I've got the playlist loaded." "Pete, how's your garbage cannon?" "Locked and loaded with yesterday's leftovers," Pete said proudly. "Plus some old socks and broken coffee cups." The game scenario was simple. The humans had to defend Space Station Omega for 2 hours. If they could do that, they would win. If the Zenthari captured the station, they would lose. Admiral Vexron's voice came over the communication system. "Human vessel, you may begin defensive positions. We will commence attack in 10 minutes. Jake picked up the communicator. "Thank you, Admiral. We're ready." But instead of taking defensive positions, Jake ordered his ship to move toward the enemy fleet. The judges monitoring the exercise were confused. The tactical display showed the human ship flying directly at 12 larger vessels. "Captain Morrison," came the voice of the head judge. "Are you certain of your strategy?" "Absolutely," Jake replied. The Zenthari fleet began their attack run. They moved like they had practiced 1,000 times. Each ship knew exactly where to go and what to do. It was a perfect example of military precision. Then Amy activated her communication system. The song began softly at first. An old Earth song with a simple melody and cheerful voice. But as it grew louder, the effect on the Zenthari was immediate and devastating. "Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down." The voice sang through every speaker on every Zenthari ship. The precise formation began to waver. Zenthari officers tried to shut off their communication systems, but Amy had locked them on. The song continued, getting louder and more annoying with each repetition. "Never gonna run around and desert you," the voice promised endlessly. "Commander." Vex-High of the lead Xanthari ship tried to contact his fleet, but his own voice was drowned out by the music. His officers were covering their ears. The Xanthari had sensitive hearing, and the repetitive human song was like torture to them. "What is this weapon?" Vex-High demanded over the emergency channel. "Earth music," Jake replied cheerfully. "Do you like it?" At that moment, Pete fired his garbage cannon. The waste disposal system launched a stream of food scraps, coffee grounds, and dirty laundry at the Xanthari ships. The garbage splattered across their clean viewports, blocking their vision. The lead Xanthari ship tried to wipe its viewport clean, but the organic matter stuck to the surface. The ship's sensors were confused by the strange objects flying through space. Were they missiles? Debris? Some kind of biological weapon? The Xanthari formation fell apart completely. Ships were turning in circles, trying to avoid the garbage, while the horrible Earth music continued to play. Some ships were firing their weapons at the waste, thinking it might be dangerous. Jake used the confusion to slip past the enemy fleet. The UHS Defiance was much smaller than the Xanthari ships, and in the chaos, nobody noticed it heading straight for the space station. "Now what?" Amy asked. "Now we defend the station," Jake said, "from the inside." The human ship docked with the station just as the Xanthari fleet finally organized itself. But the aliens were angry and confused. Their perfect battle plan had been destroyed by music and garbage. Admiral Vexron tried to restore order. All ships, ignore the auditory assault. Focus on the primary objective. But the Xanthari couldn't ignore it. The song had been playing for 20 minutes now, and it was driving them crazy. Some of the crew members were actually screaming to drown out the music. Meanwhile, Jake and his crew had taken control of the station's defenses. The station had powerful shield generators and weapons systems. But more importantly, it had a communications array that could reach across the galaxy. Amy connected the station's communication system to her music collection. Now the annoying Earth song was broadcasting to every ship in the area, including the observers from other species. The Corvani commander, Vorak, was watching the battle from his ship. "What is this noise?" he demanded. "Human psychological warfare," replied Sub-Commander Zint of the Veltar. "Crude but effective." The Xanthari ships tried to attack the station, but their crews were too distracted by the music to aim properly. Energy beams flew in all directions. Some shots hit empty space. Others hit the wrong targets. Pete had found the station's food dispensers and was using them to launch more garbage at the attacking ships. Sandwich meat and fruit juice splattered across the hulls of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. "This is not warfare," Admiral Vexron protested. "This is chaos." "This is how humans fight," Jake replied, still playing the music at maximum volume. The battle continued for another hour. The Xanthari ships circled the station like angry wasps, but they couldn't concentrate long enough to mount an effective attack. Every time they tried to form up, another wave of garbage would hit them, or the music would get louder. Some of the Xanthari crew members started to panic. They were trained for elegant, civilized warfare. They were not prepared for enemies who used food and music as weapons. Finally, Admiral Vexron made a desperate decision. He ordered his ships to ram the station. If they couldn't win through precision, they would win through brute force. But Jake was ready for this. He had been studying the Xanthari all week. He knew they were proud of their ships and would never actually damage them if they could help it. "Amy, play the sad song," he ordered. Amy switched to a slow, melancholy Earth ballad. The music was beautiful but incredibly sad. It talked about loss and loneliness and broken dreams. The effect on the Zenthari was immediate. Their species was naturally empathetic, and the sad music made them feel depressed. Several ship commanders actually started crying. "I can't attack while this music is playing," one captain reported. "It's too sad." "Focus on the mission," Vexron ordered, but his own voice was shaking. The 2 hours ended with the Zenthari fleet floating in space, covered in garbage and listening to sad music. They had failed to capture the station. The humans had won their first galactic war game. The judges were speechless. They had never seen anything like it. The humans had used no advanced weapons, no superior tactics, no overwhelming force. They had won with music and garbage. How? Admiral Vexron asked when the exercise was over. Jake smiled. "We played to your weaknesses. You're too organized, too predictable. You expected us to follow the rules. But the music, the garbage, all perfectly legal according to the rules," Amy pointed out. "You said energy weapons only. You didn't say anything about psychological warfare or waste disposal systems." The other species watching the exercise were amazed. The humans had defeated one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy, using nothing but creativity and complete disregard. For military tradition. Colonel Lisa Turner, the human military observer, was already taking notes. She could see that word of this victory would spread quickly through the Alliance. The humans had just announced their presence in galactic warfare in the most spectacular way possible. The Zenthari fleet limped away, still trying to clean garbage off their ships. They would need months to recover from the psychological trauma of their first encounter with human. Military tactics. Jake Morrison looked at his crew and smiled. That was fun. I wonder what we'll do next time. The news of the human victory spread through the Galactic Military Alliance like wildfire. Within days, every species in the Alliance had heard about the battle. The Zenthari, one of the most respected military forces in the galaxy, had been defeated by music and garbage. Commander Vorak of the Corvani battle fleet was not amused. The Corvani were warriors, proud and honorable. They had fought in countless battles and never retreated from an enemy. The idea that humans could win a war game with silly songs was insulting to everything they believed in. Request permission to face the humans in the next war game, Vorak told his superiors. The Corvani High Command agreed immediately. Their honor had been questioned by the human victory. They needed to show the galaxy that real warriors could not be defeated by tricks and jokes. The second war game was scheduled for 3 weeks later. This time, it would be ground combat on the planet Kepler-7. The scenario was simple. 2 forces would fight for control of a mining facility. The winner would be the first to capture and hold the main building for 1 hour. Staff Sergeant Danny Price led the human ground forces. He was a career soldier who had fought in the wars on Mars and Europa. His squad included some of the best fighters in the Earth Army, but they were also known for their sense of humor. Private Kelly Johnson was the squad's demolitions expert. She was small and quiet, but she could blow up anything with style. Corporal Nick Brown was the team's cook and medic. He believed that good food could solve any problem, and he was usually right. What do we know about the Corvani? Danny asked his squad during the briefing. They're big, strong, and they love to fight, Kelly replied. About 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor. They carry energy swords and shields. They fight in formation, Nick added, like ancient soldiers. They march forward and attack in straight lines. Sounds predictable, Danny said. What else? They think fighting is sacred, Kelly continued. They have ceremonies before battle. They believe dying in combat is the highest honor. Danny nodded. So they're serious about war. Very serious, Nick confirmed. They don't joke about anything. Danny smiled. Perfect. Kelly, what do you have that's not exactly a weapon? Kelly opened her equipment bag and pulled out a strange device. It looked like a flamethrower, but instead of fire, it shot streams of colorful, silly string. Modified the fuel system, she explained. Shoots non-toxic polymer strands up to 30 feet. Completely harmless, but very sticky. Outstanding, Danny, said. Nick, what's for lunch? Nick grinned and opened his field kitchen. Special military rations. I've been experimenting with the heating system. Turns out you can make them explosive if you add the right ingredients. Explosive how? Not dangerous explosive. More like ... aromatic explosive. The smell can clear a room in seconds. Danny laughed. You weaponized military food? The enemy has to eat too, Nick said proudly. The Corvani forces arrived on Kepler 7 with great ceremony. Commander Vorak led 300 warriors in full battle armor. They marched in perfect formation, their energy swords gleaming in the alien sunlight. The planet's atmosphere was breathable but humid. The mining facility sat in a valley between two hills, surrounded by rocky terrain and scattered vegetation. It was perfect ground for traditional warfare. The Corvani set up their camp with military precision. They held a ceremony to honor their ancestors and ask for victory in battle. Every warrior stood at attention while Vorak spoke about courage and honor. The human camp was different. Danny's squad had set up their equipment quickly and efficiently, then spent the rest of the day playing cards and telling jokes. They seemed more interested in having fun than preparing for war. They do not take this seriously, Vorak observed to his lieutenant. Perhaps that is why they will lose, the lieutenant replied. The battle began at dawn. The Corvani formed up in their traditional attack formation. 300 warriors arranged in neat rows, shields locked together, swords ready. They looked like an unstoppable force. They marched down the hill toward the mining facility, chanting war songs in their deep voices. The sound echoed across the valley, intimidating and powerful. The human forces were nowhere to be seen. Where are they? Vorak demanded. His answer came from the rocks above. Kelly Johnson appeared from a hidden position, carrying her modified flamethrower. She aimed it at the approaching Corvani and fired. Streams of bright pink silly string shot out of the device, covering the front rank of warriors. The sticky polymer clung to their armor and weapons, making them look ridiculous. The Corvani stopped, in confusion. They had been expecting energy weapons or projectiles. They were not prepared for something that made them look like they had been attacked by a child's toy. What is this substance? Vorak demanded, trying to pull the pink strands off his armor. Silly string, Kelly called back. Do you like the color? More humans appeared from hiding spots around the valley. Each one carried a different colored silly string dispenser. Soon the air was filled with streams of yellow, blue, green, and orange polymer. The Corvani formation collapsed as warriors tried to dodge the colorful attack. They couldn't see through the mess of strings covering their helmets. They couldn't grip their weapons properly with the sticky material on their hands. This is not battle, Vorak protested. This is mockery. This is war, Danny replied, appearing from behind a rock. Human style. The second phase of the attack began when Nick Brown activated his special lunch program. He had placed modified military rations around the battlefield, each one rigged to explode when the Corvani stepped on them. The explosions were small and harmless, but they released clouds of the most terrible smell in the galaxy. The aroma of overcooked artificial meat and fermented vegetables filled the air. It was so bad that even the humans had to wear gas masks. The Corvani, with their enhanced sense of smell, were overwhelmed. Warriors who had faced death in 100. Battles were brought to their knees by the smell of bad food. Chemical weapons, Vorak asked, trying to breathe through his mouth. Just lunch, Nick called back cheerfully. Military rations, grade C? Want some? The Corvani forces scattered, trying to escape the smell. Their perfect formation was completely destroyed. Warriors were running in all directions, covered in silly string and gasping for clean air. Danny and his squad used the chaos to reach the mining facility. They captured the main building while the Corvani were still trying to clean themselves off and find fresh air. "This is not honorable combat," Vorak protested when he finally reached the facility. "Says who?" Danny replied. "We didn't hurt anybody. We just made you uncomfortable. You made us look foolish. You made yourselves look foolish by not adapting to our tactics." The Corvani tried to retake the building, but every time they approached, more silly string and bad smells drove them back. They were brave warriors, but they couldn't fight an enemy that made them look and smell ridiculous. The hour passed with the humans firmly in control of the facility. They had won their second war game, this time against the galaxy's most feared ground forces. The aftermath was worse than the battle itself. The Corvani had to file a formal complaint with the War Games Committee, but they couldn't explain exactly what had happened without admitting they had been defeated by silly string and bad food. "The humans do not fight with honor," Vorak stated. In his report, "Define honor," the committee chairman replied. "Fighting with dignity, using proper weapons, following the traditions of warfare." Did they break any rules? Vorak was forced to admit that the humans had followed all the official regulations. There was nothing in the rules about silly string or weaponized food. Perhaps, the chairman suggested, the Corvani need to learn new ways of fighting. It was the worst insult Vorak had ever heard. But he couldn't argue with the results. The humans had won again, and they had done it while laughing. Colonel Lisa Turner watched the committee meeting from the observers section. She could see the confusion and frustration on the alien faces. The humans were changing the nature of warfare in the galaxy, and nobody knew how to respond. What will they do next? She wondered. In the human camp, Danny Price was already planning for the next war game. He had heard that the Veltar, the most intelligent species in the Alliance, wanted to face the humans. "They think they're smart," he told his squad. "Let's see how smart they really are." Kelly was working on a new device that shot confetti instead of silly string. Nick was experimenting with food that changed color when exposed to alien body heat. The humans were just getting started, and the galaxy was about to learn that intelligence was no match for creativity and a complete willingness to look foolish while winning. The news of the second human victory sent shockwaves through the Galactic Military Alliance. The Corvani, who had never retreated from battle in their entire history, had been defeated by silly string and bad smells. Military academies across the galaxy began studying the human tactics, trying to understand how such ridiculous methods could be so effective. Sub-Commander Zint of the Veltar Intellect Corps was fascinated by the human victories. The Veltar were the most intelligent species in the known galaxy. Their brains were 3 times larger than human brains, and they could process information at incredible speeds. They had won every war game for the past 50 years using pure strategy and superior technology. "The humans are interesting," Zint told his research team. "They use chaos as a weapon. But chaos can be predicted and controlled if you understand the mathematical principles behind it." The Veltar spent 2 weeks analyzing every second of the human battles. They created computer models of human behavior, studied Earth military history, and even learned about human psychology and humor. They were confident they could defeat the humans using logic and preparation. Major Chris Hamilton received the challenge while his unit was training on the moon base. He commanded a special operations team that included some of the most creative soldiers in the human military. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks was the team's intelligence officer. She was quiet and thoughtful, but she had a talent for seeing patterns that others missed. Sergeant Tony Martinez was the team's engineer. He could build anything from spare parts and had a gift for making complicated things work in simple ways. The Veltar want to play, Chris told his team during the briefing. They think they have us figured out. What do we know about them? Sarah asked. They're smart, really smart. They can calculate the outcome of a battle before it starts. They use advanced computers and complex strategies. Their ships are fast and their weapons are precise. Sounds like they think too much, Tony said. What's the scenario? Chris pulled up the battle plan on the holographic display. Space combat around a gas giant. Multiple objectives to capture and hold. The winner is whoever controls the most. Objectives after 4 hours. Standard tactical scenario, Sarah observed. They'll use mathematical models to predict our moves. Then we need to be unpredictable, Chris replied. Tony, what have you been working on? Tony grinned and activated his tablet. The screen showed plans for a device that looked like a cross between a radio and a kitchen appliance. Battlefield Reorganization System. It can move objects using tractor beams and gravity manipulators. Move what objects? Anything. Asteroids, space stations, enemy ships if they're small enough. I can literally rearrange the battlefield while we're fighting. Sarah looked impressed. The Veltar will calculate their strategy based on the starting positions. If we change the battlefield, their calculations become useless. Exactly, Tony said. Plus, I've been working on some other surprises. The war game was scheduled to take place in the Sigma Draconis system near a large gas giant with multiple moons. The battlefield contained 6 objectives, 3 space stations, 2 asteroid mining platforms, and 1 orbital research facility. The Veltar arrived with their usual efficiency. Their ships were sleek and silver, covered in sensor arrays and communication equipment. Every vessel moved with mathematical precision, following courses calculated by their advanced computers. Sub-Commander Zint stood in the command center of the flagship, surrounded by displays showing thousands of calculations. His tactical computers had analyzed every possible human strategy and prepared countermoves for each one. The humans will attempt to use psychological warfare, he announced to his crew. We have equipped all ships with audio dampeners and sensor filters. Their music and garbage will be ineffective. What about their silly string weapons? Asked a junior officer. Irrelevant in space combat, Zint replied. Our analysis shows that their ground tactics cannot be adapted to ship-to-ship warfare. They will be forced to fight conventionally, and we will defeat them easily. The human forces arrived in 3 small ships that looked like they had been built in someone's garage. The vessels were covered in random equipment and modifications that made no sense to alien observers. Their ships are primitive, a Veltar sensor operator recorded. Minimal weapons, weak shields, no apparent strategic systems. As expected, Zint said, begin the engagement. The battle started with the Veltar ships moving toward the objectives in perfect formation. Their computers had calculated the optimal approach routes and weapon firing solutions. Every move was precise and efficient. The human ships seemed to be flying randomly, with no apparent strategy or coordination. They flew in circles, changed direction suddenly, and appeared to be completely confused by the battlefield. They have no plan, Zint observed with satisfaction. Victory is certain. Then Tony Martinez activated his battlefield reorganization. System. The first sign of trouble came when the Veltar flagship detected massive gravitational anomalies throughout the battlefield. Their sensors showed impossible readings. Objects were moving in ways that violated the laws of physics. What is happening? Zint demanded. The answer came when the asteroid mining platform suddenly shifted position, moving 3 kilometers to the left. The Veltar ships that had been heading toward it were now flying toward empty space. "The humans are moving the objectives," a technician reported in disbelief. "Impossible," Zint said. "The platforms are too massive to move." But Tony's system was working perfectly. He had installed tractor beam projectors throughout the battlefield during the preparation phase, disguised as navigation beacons. Now he was using them to literally rearrange the wargame area. The research facility rotated 90 degrees. Two of the space stations swapped positions. The asteroid mining platform began spinning slowly, making it impossible for the Veltar to dock. With it, the Veltar computers went crazy trying to recalculate their strategies. Every time they solved for the new positions, Tony would move something else. Their perfect mathematical models became useless. "Adapt to the new battlefield configuration," Zint ordered, but before his ships could change course, Sarah Brooks activated the second phase of the human plan. She had been studying the Veltar communication systems and had found weakness. The Veltar ships were controlled by a central computer network. All their calculations and commands flowed through this system, making them incredibly efficient, but also vulnerable to disruption. Sarah began sending false data into their network. She convinced their computers that the gas giant was actually a black hole, that the human ships were 10 times larger than they appeared, and that the objectives were moving randomly through space. The Veltar ships began behaving erratically. Some vessels tried to flee from the imaginary black hole. Others fired at targets that didn't exist. The precise formation dissolved into chaos as each ship followed different, contradictory orders. "Systems malfunction," a Veltar technician reported. "The computer network is receiving corrupted data." "Isolate the corruption," Zint ordered. But Sarah was too clever for them. She had designed her false data to look like normal sensor readings. The Veltar computers couldn't tell the difference between real information and fake information. Meanwhile, Chris Hamilton was leading his ships toward the objectives. The Veltar were too confused to stop them. Human forces captured the first space station, while the alien ships were still trying to figure out why their sensors showed a black hole where a gas giant should be. "This is not possible," Zint said. "Our calculations were perfect." "Your calculations were based on a stable battlefield," Chris replied over the communication channel. "We changed the rules." The third phase of the attack began when Tony activated his special surprise weapons. He had filled the battlefield with small devices that looked like sensor buoys, but were actually designed to create confusion. The devices began producing sounds and lights that interfered with Veltar sensors. Some made noises like alien animals. Others projected holographic images of things that didn't exist. A few began playing Earth music at random intervals. The Veltar ships were surrounded by sensory chaos. Their advanced sensors couldn't distinguish between real threats and fake ones. Their computers were overloaded trying to process the contradictory information. "Shut down all external sensors," Zint ordered desperately. But without sensors, Veltar ships were blind. They couldn't see the objectives, couldn't track the human forces, and couldn't coordinate their attacks. The human forces captured objective after objective, while the Veltar fleet floundered in the artificial chaos. Chris Hamilton's team worked with quiet efficiency, securing each target while their enemies struggled with malfunctioning equipment and corrupted data. "This is not warfare," Zint protested. "This is sabotage." "This is adaptation," Chris replied. "You prepared for the battle you expected. We gave you the battle we wanted." The 4-hour time limit expired with the humans controlling 5 of the 6 objectives. The Veltar had managed to hold on to only one asteroid mining platform, and even that was spinning too fast for them to use effectively. The aftermath was devastating for Veltar pride. They had been defeated by an enemy that used chaos as a weapon and turned their own intelligence against them. Their perfect computers and mathematical models The emergency session of the Galactic Military Alliance Council was called just 3 days after the human victory over the Valtar. Representatives from all major species gathered on the neutral station at Alpha Centauri Prime. The mood was tense, and the discussions were heated. Admiral Kevin Foster represented Earth at the council meeting. He was a veteran diplomat who had negotiated humanity's entry into the Alliance. He sat quietly at the human delegation table, watching the alien representatives argue among themselves. "This cannot continue," declared Admiral Vexron of the Zentari. His gray skin was darker than usual, a sign of stress among his people. "The humans have made a mockery of military tradition." Commander Varak of the Corvani stood up, his massive frame towering over the other delegates. "They do not fight with honor. They use tricks and jokes instead of courage and skill. They defeated us with superior tactics," Sub-Commander Zint of the Veltar said quietly. His large brain was still processing the humiliation of his fleets. "Defeat, but their methods are disturbing." The council chairman, an ancient being from the oldest species in the Alliance, called for order. "We are here to discuss the human participation in war games. What exactly are the complaints?" Admiral Vexron activated his presentation display. "The humans use psychological warfare that disrupts proper military operations. They broadcast music that prevents concentration. They launch organic waste as projectiles. They refuse to follow established tactical procedures. They move the battlefield itself," Zint added. "They manipulated our computer systems with false data. They created chaos where there should be order. They covered our warriors in sticky substances and made them smell terrible," Borak said, his voice filled with disgust. "This is not warfare. This is pranks." Admiral Foster listened to the complaints with growing amusement. The aliens were essentially admitting that humans had beaten them, but they were too proud to accept that they had been outfought. "May I respond?" Foster asked politely. The chairman nodded. "Please, Admiral Foster, explain your species' approach to military exercises." Foster stood up and looked around the room. "The war games have rules. Energy weapons only. No permanent damage to personnel or equipment. Victory achieved through tactical objectives. My people followed every rule exactly." "But the music, double quotes, Vexron protested. "Not prohibited by the rules," Foster replied. "You said energy weapons only. You didn't say anything about audio transmissions. The garbage. Organic waste launched through standard ship systems. Still not prohibited. If you wanted to ban refuse disposal, you should have included it in the regulations. The silly string and bad smells." Vorik began. "Non-lethal, non-permanent, and completely within the spirit of training exercises," Foster interrupted. "Your warriors were not harmed. They were just uncomfortable." Sub-Commander Zint leaned forward. "What about the battlefield manipulation? You move the objectives during combat, using tractor beam technology that is standard throughout the galaxy." Foster explained. "The rules say we must capture and hold objectives. They don't say the objectives have to stay in the same place." The council chamber fell silent. The alien representatives were realizing that the humans had not actually broken any rules. They had simply found creative ways to work within them. "This is not the intent of the war games," the chairman said finally. "These exercises are meant to test military skill and tactical thinking." "And they did exactly that," Foster replied. "My people demonstrated superior tactical thinking by adapting to circumstances your forces could not handle. But the methods were double quotes. Vexron searched for the right word. "Effective," Foster said simply. "That's what matters in warfare." Behind the scenes, the real drama was happening in the observer galleries. Military officials from dozens of species were watching the proceedings with intense interest. Some were amazed by human creativity. Others were terrified by the implications. General Crix of the Torvan Empire whispered to his aide, "If the humans can defeat the Big Three with jokes and garbage, what could they do in a real war?" Captain Sella of the Draconian fleet was taking detailed notes. "We need to study these tactics. The humans have changed the nature of warfare." Meanwhile, news of the council session was spreading throughout the galaxy. Military academies were requesting copies of the human battle recordings. Tactical analysts were trying to understand how such simple methods could be so devastating. The debate in the council chamber continued for hours. Each species presented their case against human participation in war games. The arguments were essentially the same. Humans didn't fight the way everyone else expected them to fight. "The humans have won 3 consecutive war games," the chairman summarized. "They defeated the Zenthari fleet with audio weapons and projectile refuse. They defeated Corvani ground forces with polymer adhesives and olfactory weapons. They defeated the Veltar fleet with battlefield manipulation and data corruption. And rubber chickens," Admiral Foster added helpfully. "Excuse me?" Foster activated his own presentation. The final engagement included the use of rubber chickens as psychological warfare tools, very effective against species that take themselves too seriously. The alien delegates stared at him in disbelief. The humans had been using toy chickens as weapons. "Let me read from Lieutenant Grace Murphy's after-action report," Foster continued. Quote, "The enemy was neutralized using tactical puns and rubber. Poultry. Casualties. 0. Enemy morale. Completely destroyed. Recommend rubber chickens for all future operations." End quote. Commander Varak made a sound like a wounded animal. The idea that his proud warriors had been defeated by rubber toys was too much to bear. "This settles it," Admiral Vexron declared. "The humans cannot be allowed to continue participating in war games. They have corrupted the entire process. They have made warfare into a joke," Varak agreed. "They have introduced chaos into a system that requires order," Zint added. The chairman called for a formal vote. "All in favor of excluding humanity from future war games?" Every alien representative raised their hand, tentacle, or appropriate appendage. The vote was unanimous. "The motion passes," the chairman announced. "Humanity is formally excluded from Galactic Military Alliance war games due to incompatible military philosophies and excessive creativity in violation of established protocols." Admiral Foster nodded politely. "I understand. May I ask one question?" "Of course. What's the official reason you're giving for this decision?" The chairman considered carefully. "Incompatible tactical approaches and unconventional interpretation of combat regulations. And the unofficial reason?" The chairman looked around the room at the defeated alien commanders. "You're too good at this, and you make it look easy. That's embarrassing for everyone else." Foster smiled. "I'll inform Earth. Command, will that be all?" "One more thing," the chairman said. "The Alliance would like to request copies of all human tactical manuals for educational purposes." "I'll see what I can do," Foster replied. As the council session ended, the alien representatives filed out quietly. They had achieved their goal of excluding the humans, but it felt more like defeat than victory. Admiral Foster returned to his ship and composed his report to Earth Command. The message was simple. Mission accomplished. Humans banned from war games for being too creative and winning too much. Galaxy officially scared of our tactical superiority. He attached Lieutenant Murphy's rubber chicken report as supporting evidence. 3 months later, the first real galactic war broke out when the Hegemony Empire attacked the outer colonies. The Alliance forces, fighting with traditional tactics and conventional strategies, were quickly overwhelmed. Admiral Foster received another message from the Alliance Council. This one was much more humble in tone. "Dear Admiral Foster," it began, "the Alliance finds itself in need of military assistance. Would humanity consider participating in actual warfare? We promise not to complain about your methods this time." Foster smiled and began composing his reply. "Delighted to help. Our forces are ready to deploy. Fair warning, we've been practicing with whoopee cushions and tactical glitter bombs. Hope you're prepared for what comes next." In the barracks of the U.S. Defiance, Captain Jake Morrison was briefing his crew for their first real combat mission. "Remember everything we learned in the war games," he told them. "The enemy expects conventional warfare. We're going to give them something completely different." Amy Rodriguez was already loading her music collection with the most annoying songs she could find. Pete Collins was modifying the ship's systems to launch everything from garbage to party supplies. "What's the mission?" Amy asked, but Jake smiled. "Win a war using the same methods that got us banned from war games. Show the galaxy that humans don't just fight differently, we fight better." The ship launched toward the combat zone, its crew ready to prove that creativity, humor, and complete disregard for military tradition were the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. Behind them, the Alliance fleets followed, hoping that human tactics would be as effective in real war as they had been in the games. They were about to learn that the humans had been holding back during the exercises. After all, when the safety restrictions were removed and the gloves came off, human creativity knew no bounds. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when a species that treated war